Hello there. Welcome to the 6th episode of the Virtual Poetry Cafe at Martha's Vineyard Playhouse. This will be our final foray as our alleged off-season turns to thoughts of summer. In normal times, the Poetry Cafe occurs monthly from autumn to spring, and of course it occurs indoors at the Playhouse. The Poetry Cafe will return after the summer fades away, and right now it's anyone's guess whether we will be virtual or back inside for real. Stay tuned, stay safe, stay healthy. Today's program will join the 5 other virtual cafes we've done so far and can be seen online at mvplayhouse.org for the next few weeks. Please tell your friends, especially those seeking continued art and entertainment offerings on their home screens. We've passed the equinox and the Fool's Day and yet remain in the clutches of a germ. But it's now time for poetry. It's always time for poetry. I'm your host, Arnie Reisman, and we have 3 more poets for your enjoyment. Donald Nitchie, Holly St. John Bergon, and Steve Ewing. They will read in that order, and I'll wind up our program and then return your screens to you. Each of us will read 3 poems. First up is Donald Nitchie, the island's poet among poets. Since 2018, he has been leading poetry drop-in sessions. These are in-class writing exercises, usually under the auspices of our libraries. His poetry collection, Driving Lessons, was published in 2008. Here is Donald Nitchie.
Hello. Thank you, Arnie. Thank you, MV Playhouse. Thank you, MJ. My first poem is called The Landline. We finally got rid of the landline, the number since before I was born that we kept when we moved back into the homestead. It brought us no joy, just junk calls from timeshares, package deals to Orlando, fake messages from the IRS requiring immediate attention, not to mention the charges. It was time. But what about calls from my father? Even though he never rang once since his death years before, I still wondered how he would if he ever tried. No matter how distant he could sometimes be, he always kept in touch. My mother insists he's not dead, just mad at her, and says he's probably hanging out on the Jersey Shore like he always wanted, having a grand time with all his friends, staying up all hours. I wish I could believe her, especially when sometimes I miss the landline. It's blinking, telling us someone called, even if only hang-ups or some robot saying my name over and over. I can just hear him, my father, calling on a payphone from some sports bar near the beach, game in the background, pack of cigarettes, and a beer close by. Thought you'd never pick up, he says. Reason I'm calling, listen, you should visit. It's been too long. The cheesesteaks here are tremendous, and I've got a pull-out couch. In September, the water's still warm, and almost everyone else will be gone. The second poem I'm going to read is a poem about my mother, who is 91 and lives in Windermere. And it's called The Resident. Geese fly over the salt marsh next to my mother's nursing home, barely clearing the cattails. sounding like children running across a playground when she was a young teacher and they were all hers. The CNA from Honduras sets her supper by the bed and lifting off the lid says, "Your favorite, scrod." They laugh, and as the aide leaves, I understand. It's all cream scrod from here on out. Then, out the window, at the far end of the marsh, stepping carefully out of the trees as if testing a frozen pond, the fawn. So I wrote a lot of poems this past year, including several about my parents. Partly because I found my father's diary from 1964 and just shook some stuff loose, I guess. So here's another poem about my father. It's called The Squirrel. I keep thinking about the squirrel I saw yesterday, climbing the oak tree outside my window, mouthful of leaves, ascending so quickly. Not the way I struggled up ropes in gym class, but more like the rock climber I once saw, fitting his fingers and toes into cracks and floating up a vertical wall. The squirrel made his way like that, paw over paw until it got to the top, paused, and then launched into a nearby spruce. Later, I discover squirrels make leaf nests and sometimes have several, which makes sense. One for summer, one for the rest of the year, and more to keep the redtails guessing. And for some reason, I remember my father, how he wallpapered every room of our house on Conduit Street on weekends, weeknights, listening to ball games, jazz, Pall Mall smoldering and a glass ashtray beside him, along with a can of warm ale, ironing board with sheets of paper, rolling pan of glue. It took him years to finish, including the bedrooms, kitchen, 3 stairways, 2 baths, the pantry leading out back, even part of one closet, some rooms twice. We loved that house. We had rooms of our own, friends nearby. We didn't love the wallpaper especially, but maybe at Christmas, when those Victorian patterns were bathed in candle glow. I keep thinking about that squirrel rushing back to his tree because now he's a he, and like my father, just wants to make this latest the best, most spacious nest yet. The way my father would always give us choices, as if suggesting possible life paths. So how would you like your room this time? Revolutionary War cannonballs, fife and drum, or the solar system? World War I biplanes, or creatures of the deep? Just remember, whatever you decide, you'll have to live with it for a while. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Donald. Thank you very much. Next up is Holly St. John Bergon. Her poems have appeared in several national publications like the Sewanee Review and Plowshares. She's taught college courses in modern poetry and creative writing, and she now lives in Oak Bluffs with her husband, novelist Frank Bergon. Together, they've published translations of several Spanish poets. Here's Holly St. John Bergon.
Hi, Arnie. Thank you. And thanks everyone for tuning in. I'm going to read some poems that I've written during this pandemic year. It has been for most of us a strange and difficult time, but it has included moments that have been blessedly expansive. And I have paid perhaps much more attention to home than ever before, but at the same time, my mind has been much occupied with global politics and global health. So here's a poem that I wrote early on in the pandemic when things were pretty deeply uncertain. Sentinel. I wrote about hawks once before when they were nesting and feeding their fledglings. Now, in a time of pandemic, 2 hawks have returned to my yard, scattering mourning doves and sparrows, eliciting the blue jays' jeers and dive-bombing crows. Undaunted, the hawks perch on watchtowers of pitch pine and oak, sentinels surveying the hunting grounds below. I am mesmerized, wanting only to delight in their gaze, their swiveling heads and gleaming buff breasts, in something else alive in this fractured world. They startle me with a hiss and crackle, staring straight down at me, beaks clacking. In this time of radical separation, let them fly at me, raucous and whistling. And later on, a late season rose. Here at home, not under house arrest, but not. The lockdowns, the curfews, the sight of shuttered shops and empty streets. Out my window, 2 deer, uncurfewed, cut straggling hoof prints through an inch of snow, ever hopeful of one late season rose. A coastal New England winter settles in, snow-tipped seagrasses bent by gusts of wind. The message in a bottle of fog and fairy horns. Hello, are you there? Goodbye, they call, as waves sketch a new shoreline, the land and our lives altered anew each day. At my window, I imagine a future, while deer forage ghosts of roses in the snow. And finally, the pandemic for me has allowed me a lot of time to read, and I'm about a third of the way through the new biography of Sylvia Plath. And I discovered that she had, in fact, spent time on the vineyard. Bike riding with Sylvia Plath. She would have remembered today's blue sky from summers at the vineyard sailing camp, where she learned about tacking and healing and coming about in the calm or choppy waters of the lagoon, all the techniques necessary to survive vagaries of wind and waves, the weather of the world. Separated by some 20 years, we never met, yet shared a Cold War country, a moral and philosophical outrage against the McCarthy era, the bomb, the subtle strictures on what girls could learn, all the while loving the romantic lure of berets and cafes and new wave films. Loving too, the wind in our hair, the flight of our bikes along the East Chop bluffs, the sun above and vineyard sound below, like seabirds whose wings were our strong legs, fearless for that one moment of flying under the sky, a blue she would have known, and where we both were, maybe, most at home. Thank you.
Thank you, Holly. And wow, I don't, for Sylvia Plath, you know, if anybody likes to listen to her poems, I would suggest going online and looking up Daddy, where she reads it herself, and it's quite stunning. Thanks, Holly. Next up is Steve Ewing, the poet laureate of Edgartown. In fact, he's the only laureate the town has ever had, or should have. Author of a new book entitled Town Meeting Poems, he's also a quite well-known dock builder. And now, here's the inimitable Steve Ewing.
Thank you, Arnie. And thanks everybody for showing up out there, wherever you are. The first poem I'm going to read, I wrote for a town meeting last year, right in the height of this pandemic. It's called Pandemic, Prejudice, and the Pagoda Tree. When I was a boy, the pagoda tree reached the sky. Rocking on my homemade bike, I could see the tippy top. Its massive trunk grounded me. Huge roots warped the street. We rode on by our great tree beast with rhino hide, feeling something shift inside. Pagoda grew. As a man, its lofty limbs with bushels full of tiny fluttering, feathered leaves dancing on the warming southwest island wind tickles me to believe it sailed from China in a pot, years before the Union Jack tore redneck rebel racial pride. Feeling something shift inside, pagoda grew. The Great War filled trenches shoulder high of mustard gas, while young men died in heaps. They cried, the war to end all war. While something moved deep inside, pagoda grew. World War II's mushroom cloud belched its venom to the sky. A massive trunk spewed burning rain fluttering down, raw as tears in tanks and trains of German steel. Our world shifted on its heels. Pagoda grew. When Kennedy and King was shot while telling us the ugly truth, lifting hope and firing dreams that fluttered down from mountain peaks, sparkling on humanity, something sure did shift inside. Pagoda grew. Watts burned hot, Boston bust, Vietnam crushed, while Nixon lied, and oh, so many young boys died. The tide must turn, the planet cried, and still we tucked the fear inside. Pagoda grew. Now younger children ride new bikes on big tree roots up Water Street. They gawk in awe, its massive trunk, so filled with life, they shift on seats to share the sight, and still pagoda grew. A brand new plague came one night all around the busy world. Rich and poor, it clutched our throats and shut our little island town, reminded us and slowed us down, reset the planet back in time. Friends and neighbors held on tight. We shifted upside down. Pagoda grew. Then George Floyd died. He couldn't breathe. While years of fear and prejudice bound up in a bony bigot's knobby knee, and like Corona took our breath, gave us masks and separateness. This knee and virus finally made us realize what we truly need. A global shift is due indeed. I feel we have the strength inside. Our children's lives are on the line. Together, we can surely thrive. Divided, we are done. And yes, with tiny, awesome leaves fluttering in the southwest breeze, rippling in the summer sun, pagoda surely grew. My next poem is about a good friend of mine called John Moffat. It's called John's Ladder. It lies waiting, bolted to the low platform on the northeast corner of the pier. A swimming ladder, painted and installed for year-round use. It lies waiting for John to climb up dripping from his annual New Year's dip. A big man, the ladder takes his weight, proud to be of use. Or summer dips after the crowds of social chatter, have slurped down Jimmy's last little neck, or Mike's last rum and tonic, or Julie's last bit of finger food, John strips down and dives right in. The cool, clean harbor water creases as he swims a slow and lazy arc back to the corner of the pier, back to the corner of the pier, back to his ready ladder. As it feels John's weight, it sighs a bit, proud to bear this good, kind, solid man up and out, dripping in the slowly dimming day. John knew well his last swim, and as he slowly drifted from Caroline and Maggie, the guys at lounge on Friday afternoons, as he saw Jimmy drift off in the rip, John knew well as he climbed out, wet and tingling, in that New Year's freezing, steaming chill. This sure was his last dip, the last climb up this ladder. And with all graciousness, all the love he held inside, all John had to give, he reached out, he held us in his slow arc as he climbed up and out. He carried all of us with him. And the last poem is another pandemic poem. It's called I Can't Be Quiet. I can't be quiet when all around me are making noise. An old beast is on edge, a new tension is deafening. Deep, sharp lines are being scored in cold, raw glacial rock, forming rifts, steep valleys between once fast friends. I can't be quiet when people I care for are hardening. Folks I've known for years are building walls with bricks of hate, stacking lies with stones of bigotry, using mortar of bitterness and the rubble of despair, penning in the pain of prejudice with the bile of white pride. I can't be quiet as so many are on their feet, pleading in good faith to be free to loosen long neglected chains, shackles of segregation, rusted from years of prejudice and pain. I can't be quiet while those I'll never get to know are falling alone, weightless in corona, dropping like leaves, spiraling slowly down through deep blue sky, turning over and over in dappled light. They drop in open disbelief. I can't be quiet anymore as we walk that long, slow walk of numb regret, reaching out for the door where hate loiters, blind fear lingers, and our old encephalitic national trauma stands steadfast, guarding that ancient primal simple truth, sucking life's sweet breath. I can't be quiet anymore as our children lean over Earth's long rail, afraid the last helmsman was complicit and brother deceit had set the course. I smile to see them as a body lean in against that thick, still solid tiller. I smile to see the shift of the long, slow arc. I smile for them and for what's left of us. We can't be quiet anymore as we strive to heal, to forgive and be refreshed. It's time to bend together and heed life's mystery. Knowledge, what we know is less than what we don't. And in reflection, understand as we score and stack and plead, as we fall and walk and learn and lean and learn to heal. The children hiding in our hearts are one and all begging to be free. Thank you.
And thank you, Steve. Thanks very much. That poem about the pagoda tree is still ringing in my ears. Thanks again to all our wonderful poets today. Great choices. Keep writing, keep reading. To wrap up today's cafe program, allow me to read 3 poems, all of which can be found in my last book, The Lightheaded in the Dark Ages. This first one focuses on the belief in the necessity to see the absurdity in life. It's called Otherwise We'd All Go Mad. While we all pretended not to notice, the dinosaurs slipped on the banana peel An insecure titter rippled through the insects. The hunters, as decoys of nonchalance, pulled the tablecloth out from under the gatherers, sending rules of law crashing to the floor. The faithful found the beauty of truth in the stunning shock of cream pies slowly sliding off their feral faces. Millions of greenhorns and scapegoats, not looking where they were told they were going, tumbled down open manholes in every war. Suicidal locomotives ripped up tracks, dragging boxcars of innocence and mirth over the cliffs of human comedy. We laughed like there was no tomorrow, but tomorrow always shows up, besotted and ravenous, dressed to kill. I don't go out anymore, make sandwiches from the fatted calf, read Emily Dickinson, watch old Marx Brothers movies, then for warmth, set fire to another TV. You can get anything delivered nowadays. All right, I'll try and lighten it up. The next poem focuses on what all writers can relate to. It's called Writer's Block. A novella crept up and slapped me in the back of the head. Before I could say you got my attention, it threw me to the floor with the vengeance of Ahab. I lay there in a heap like an afterthought. It left the room, but not before pocketing my Mont Blanc. On a belly of redemption, I slid to the phone and called 911. Outside, I heard an old car huff away. As it wheezed into the distance, it cross-faded with a siren that cross-faded with a marimba deep within my insecurities. A rapping on the door obliterated all sounds, like Glade covers kitchen odors. There, dressed in a spanking blue uniform, a bit bow-legged, stood a poem, slapping a nightstick into the meat of its palm. What seems to be the problem? Mind if I look around? After several minutes of squeezing pillows, threatening furniture, rifling drawers, staring into the abyss of closets, "You're missing a pen," it observed keenly. The silence, usually deafening, was now blinding. I cleared my throat and lowered my hopes. What good is it? I have nothing to say. Here's your problem. It walked behind the desk, took its nightstick and smashed the hell out of my writer's block with the vengeance of the God of the Old Testament. Under my nose, it held a new Mont Blanc. The aroma took me back to the beginning. A satisfied poem then left the house. As it turned to look back, a bright sun shot rays of cleanliness through my window, like beacon wax finishes a floor. And finally, one for the season, the title, New England Maternity Ward. In a gray-washed land of lions and lambs, where furless predators on hind legs roam in a vain search for a black swan, there in a white theater where operators practice with the forceps of imagination, squeezing life, there the obstetrician that is March, with cold hands delivers a stunted spring, all cries muffled and choreographed in anticipation, all eyes down on April, the shrillest birth. Outside, first flowers hurry through a hoary crust. Standing in a beige corner like an apparition, barely able to be made out, arms folded, there, the nurse that is May, whose expression is benign, yet cool, whose touch feels as far away as summer. Thank you. Tell your friends to keep tuning in to mvplayhouse.org for virtual entertainment and inspiration, as well as news of upcoming events. I want to thank all our poets again. I want to thank all of you out there for joining us. Please stay safe and please come back. Ciao.